So there was this young teen and he loved this video game. He would play it every single chance he got. It was called Race Around the World, where all of the characters in the video game, they would race around the world on foot. And they weren't subject to the laws of gravity or any of the things we are. They could jump over the Grand Canyon. They could run across the Atlantic Ocean. They could run straight through walls, through buildings. They could leap over tall things, over waterfalls. They could do all of these things. They could swim across the ocean underwater, never taking a breath. He loved this video game. Now, one day while he was playing this video game, a storm was going on outside. And then all the power went out. And so he got up and he flipped the breakers and the power came back on. So he went back to play his video game. But as soon as he sat down and he took the remote in his hand, lightning struck the house. And a surge of energy went through all the wiring and it came to his game and it exploded and knocked him back. And when he woke up, he was inside of the game. And his favorite character held out his hand and pulled him up, said, "Come on, race with me." So they began racing around the world. It was amazing. But every time the boy came to something that he couldn't do in the natural world, he stopped. For example, he'd be running and running. They get to the Grand Canyon and he would stop on the edge. And then his favorite character would come back and say, "What's wrong with you? Jump." So he backs up and he jumps and he goes all the way over the Grand Canyon. And then he's running again and he stops. He stops at a building. Now, his favorite character just ran through it, but he comes back and it's like, "What's wrong with you? Run straight through it." So he backs up after thinking a bit. He runs straight through the building and they're running again. And he comes to the ocean and he stops. And his favorite character comes back and is like, "What's wrong? Just keep running. You can either run on top of the water or you can dive in and swim across the ocean." So after thinking about it a while, he finally dives in, holds his breath, and goes under the entire ocean without a problem. And now he's like, "Man, how can I do these things?" He's talking to his favorite character. And his favorite character looks at him. He's like, "Do you not know that here, your natural laws you're used to, they don't have dominion over you? The law of gravity, it doesn't have dominion over you. I mean, the law of your physicality not being able to run through a wall, it doesn't have dominion over you. Those laws don't have dominion over you here." Now, you might say, well, that illustration goes better in a science fiction movie than in the devotional over the Word of God. But that illustrates our text today. Remember, we're in Romans 7:1. Paul says, "Or do you not know, brethren? For I speak to those who know the law, that the law has dominion over a man as long as he lives." Now, let's read it without that parentheses. He says, "Or do you not know, brethren, that the law has dominion over a man as long as he lives?" So he's talking about the law having dominion over a man. Now, remember, we must back up. Remember, yesterday I gave the illustration about that dog that was transformed to a human, yet goes back and eats dog food, thinking that would give him the body and the health he desires. And remember, the man said to him, his trainer, he was like, "Do you not know now you're a human being? Or do you not know that dog food, it's insufficient. Dog food will not help you. And that's what Paul is doing here. Remember the question from chapter 6. He says, shall we sin because we're not under the law but under grace? He says, certainly not. What do you mean, shall you sin? Shall you continue to sin? What do you mean? Certainly not. Do you not know that grace has freed you from sin? And now you're a slave of your loving master? Or do you not know that the law no longer has dominion over you? Do you not know that, Christian? And you're like, wait a second. Now, when I go back to chapter 6, he said, for sin shall not have dominion over you, for you're not under the law, but under grace. Why is he talking about the law having dominion over you now? Well, simply put, if you go to the law, now everyone is born under the law. But even as a Christian, if you go subject yourself under the law, guess what? The law will have dominion over you. And because of that, sin will have dominion over you. You're like, why? Well, remember when he first speaks of being under the law, he says what the law says. It says to those who are under the law that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may be guilty before God. For by the deeds of the law, no flesh will be justified. For by the law comes the knowledge of sin. You're like, well, that's before you're converted. Yes, you're exactly right. But even as a Christian, when you go back and put yourself under the law, you're doing yourself a great disservice. I mean, it no longer has dominion over you, but you can, remember, go back to that master even though you've been freed, or in this language, you have died to him. Christian, when we go back, the law won't help you. And sin will have dominion. We go to the law not to sin, but the law is not going to help us not sin. Why? Because the law just says, obey me. And you try and you fail, and the law says, you are guilty. You are condemned. You did not obey me. Remember, I demand perfection. You must obey me. Why did you not obey me? You sin. That's what the law does. And our sin will have dominion over us. And we'll see even more as we walk through chapter 7 why sin will have dominion over us if we go back and subject ourselves to the law. So, as a Christian, yes, we've been transformed, but if we go back to the law, put ourselves back under the dominion of the law, sin is going to have dominion in our lives. So, Christian, remember the questions. It's like, look, sin will not have dominion over you because you're not under the law, but under grace. But what, shall you sin because you're not under the law, but under grace? Certainly not. He says, do you not know? You've been set free from sin and become a slave of your loving master. Or do you not know that the law only has dominion over man as long as he lives? And that's pointing back to chapter 6, that you've died with Christ. You've been united with him. And we'll speak more of that next time, Lord willing. But you have died with Christ. The law no longer has dominion over you. Therefore, because the law no longer has dominion over you, sin will no longer have dominion over you. But, Christian, you have a responsibility, because you can choose to go back to the law under the dominion of the law, and sin will have dominion over you. Even though you've been united with Christ, even though you've been freed from sin, even though you've been made a slave of God, you can make that choice and go back and put yourself under the dominion of the law. And sin will have dominion over you. You won't become more righteous. You won't become more holy. You'll become more prideful if you keep it, and you'll become more depressed and broken when you break it. It's not going to help you. You don't go back and put yourself under the dominion of the law, because, Christian, you are not under the law. You have died to the law. You are under grace. Grace of your master, The grace of your master has freed you from sin. The grace of the master has changed your heart. The grace of your master has poured out his love in your heart. The grace of your master who laid down his life for you, suffered the wrath you and I deserve, rose on the third day for you, keeps us in his hands. The grace of your master who sends his spirit to dwell in you. He doesn't leave you like the law and says, obey me. He says, obey me, but I'll give you my spirit. Remember Ezekiel? I'll put my spirit in you and cause you to walk in my statute. We are under grace. So Christian, do not go back and put yourself under the dominion of the law. For you're not under the law. You are under grace.